Democrats are well positioned to take back Congress in the November midterms, and they've already seen big wins across the country in smaller races. More specifically, progressive candidates are gaining in popularity, in no small part due to the fact that centrist, corporate Democrats are actively fighting against them. They're not doing much else, but they are doing that. Democratic candidates are winning in districts that were won by Trump, and where they are not winning, they're closing the margins in very significant ways. Just yesterday, progressive candidate Ana Lilia Mejia won a congressional seat in a purplish leans right district, but she didn't just win, she won by 20 points.
Just minutes after polls closed in New Jersey's 11th congressional district tonight, progressive Democrat Ana Lilia Mejia defeated Republican Joe Hathaway to fill the seat vacated by now Governor Mikey Sherrill. It's the latest progressive victory of this election cycle, could be a bellwether for November.
However, these victories are perhaps most notably felt in places that are seen to be Republican strongholds, places like Texas and Florida, and more often than not, what happens in places like these can be seen as indicators for what we can expect to see in red districts across the nation. Texas had a contentious primary season. As some of you may recall, we had two strong candidates from both parties battling for their spot on the November ballot. Things started off mostly okay on the Democratic side, but they got a little weird as we got closer to the primary day. I'm not going to rehash all of it. There were also questions as to whether or not there was voter suppression in Jasmine Crockett's own district. But in any case, James Talerico pulled through and he won the nomination. On the Republican side, we saw incumbent Senator John Cornyn in the battle of his life against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. The race between the two was so tight that Trump refused to endorse either one of them. Also, most of the campaigning from the Republican side was just about which candidate was more loyal to Trump, a president who is decaying in front of our very eyes.
The primary on the Republican side, you have John Cornyn out today with an ad about Ken Paxton and his love shack. So it's Ken Paxton driving in a convertible with all of his various mistresses towards the place that he's going to bed them. And then the fact that John Cornyn represents the old guard. And this was one of the main points that Talarico was making. So Texas has been living under one-party rule for decades, and it has not gotten them anything good. They have higher poverty rates than the national average, higher uninsured rates. The average wage in Texas is lower than the national average as well. And John Cornyn is the summation of that problem. He was also elected when Talarico was in middle school.
Neither candidate chose to look forward to the post-Trump era, but even if they had, I don't think that their base is ready to have that conversation or face that reality just quite yet. The primary resulted in Cornyn beating Paxton, but not by enough, so there's going to be a runoff next month. And here in Texas, the dream of Trumpism is, unfortunately, for me and many other liberal and progressive Texans, alive and well, and our Republican elected leaders are hell-bent on preserving that Trumpy dream long after Trump goes away, whenever and however he will go. We still have Greg Abbott to deal with here. We still have an overwhelmingly Republican state government, and we currently have 2 Republican senators in Washington. But there is a chance that we could be getting rid of one of them this November. If Dems can unseat John Cornyn, that would be a victory the likes of which this state has not seen in decades. People forget that Texas hasn't always been so deeply red. We had a Democratic governor in the 90s. However, each time the Republicans would win a major election in Texas, they would compound their power, systematically and strategically making voting against them more and more difficult with each election cycle. In major cities across Texas, which are overwhelmingly blue, the state has recently made a habit of overstepping into local politics. Houston is all too familiar with these overreaches. The state government has interfered in our elections. The governor has even said that he is investing $25 million to flip Harris County red. We have a state-appointed official running HISD, and more recently, Governor Abbott has threatened to withhold crucial state funding to the city of Houston if the mayor does not fall in line regarding ICE cooperation. And our mayo is a bit of a dino if I ever saw one, so he will probably end up capitulating, but either way, a governor isn't supposed to be able to influence local politics to this level. So we need all the help we can get wherever we can get it, and the Democratic movement in Texas is and must be strong and resilient to constantly be fighting back against these forces. We don't always win, but we do win sometimes, and when we don't win, at least we don't go down easily. In the first quarter, James Talerico raised $27 million for his Senate campaign, a record-breaking haul. According to the Texas Tribune, it is the largest ever sum that any Senate candidate in any state has raised in the first quarter of an election year. And it's a very specific record that he's broken, but it's a record nonetheless. So to drive the point home, he outraised other Democrats this cycle who posted impressive hauls of their own in competitive Senate races where Democrats have better odds, including Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, and more than double the totals of former Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, former North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, and former Alaska Representative Mary Peltola. And perhaps even more significantly, Talarico's numbers eclipse that of former Democratic Senate candidates right here in Texas. Colin Allred raised nearly $10 million in the first quarter of his election year, and Beto O'Rourke raised just $6.7 million in the first quarter of 2018. Neither of them won their races, obviously, but perhaps Talarico can do more with the money than his predecessors were able to do. However, even with these impressive fundraising numbers, Texas is no easy state to win, and Talarico's team seems to know that. Winning in Texas will require unprecedented resources, said Seth Krasny, Talarico's campaign manager. This grassroots fundraising haul puts our movement in a strong position to spread our message in some of the most expensive media markets in the country, but we can't take our foot off the gas. Overall, Talarico's brought in over $40 million since he entered the Senate race last September, coming from over 540,000 individual contributors from 246 out of 254 Texas counties. But how does that compare to his Republican opponents? Well, Cornyn and Paxton are still campaigning against each other, so I'm sure that's dipping into their coffers. But Talarico also continued his streak of outraising his potential Republican opponents, tripling Senator John Cornyn's haul and beating Attorney General Ken Paxton by 12-fold. Cornyn, who is locked in a bitter runoff battle with Paxton, raised nearly $9 million in the first quarter across his fundraising apparatus, including $3.4 million in the weeks after the primary, his campaign announced. Paxton raised $2.2 million. So Cornyn is ahead of Paxton, and again, Cornyn did actually beat Paxton in the primary, but modern politics is really a battle of who can raise the most money. So if Talarico can keep up his momentum, and if his opponents happen to fall behind for some reason, then he looks to be in a pretty good place. But I always have to say this because it's true. A lot can happen between now and November. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.